Welcome to Baltic World. I'm Charlene.
I'm Crispin.
And this is our week in review. Baltic World is where we discuss important issues facing Northern, Central, and Eastern Europe. But before we begin, how are you, Crispin?
I am excellent, I think. I've obviously had a lot to do with my work.
Yeah.
There has been a lot of excitement around what's happening with Asia, what's happening with China, of course. There is a lot of concern, and this is not talked about enough. There's been a lot of concern about how close Iran is to breaking out with nuclear weapons. And so just as America is trying to focus sort of laser-like on the Taiwan issue, there are problems brewing up around the rest of the world. So it's been hard to keep track of everything, but it has been, it's been good. My friends took me out again for yet another birthday party last night, those that couldn't make it to my first one. So I'm a little bit green, but otherwise it's been good.
So 2 birthday weekends.
Yeah.
And you were saying, for me, I'm going to get this on camera, I don't care, that, I shouldn't drink so much, so I'm not going to drink anymore. And then you...
Well, but I didn't set out to do that. Like, I think there is a difference between being, going out with friends and in the context of that, everybody's drinking and so you also drink, to being disproportionately like getting hammered. And so there is a fine line. So we might have had a little bit too much to drink, but not we didn't go crazy. It wasn't like a few weekends ago where I just couldn't do anything for days. Drinking should be really properly socially dependent. So if you are with people that are just alcoholics who are drunk all of the time, well, that's probably not very good for you. But if you have people that are going out on a Friday night or a Saturday night as a collective group, having a few drinks, or you have a barbecue and you drink kind of light beverages and things like that, then that's the solution. But here's the thing: once I start drinking, this is I guess the issue I have with alcohol. I'm definitely not alcoholic. I don't have any dependency or craving, or anything like that. But I do binge. So what I do need to do is make sure that I drink alcohol that is very low alcohol level, so I can drink lots and lots of it without getting completely hammered.
It's kind of weird. Like, I don't drink so much, so like one drink will last me an entire night. Like, I really take my time with alcohol. Well, firstly, I'm a lightweight, so there's that. And then secondly, like, I'm not a huge drinker. I'm like, oh, cool, I'll have it, but like, I don't know. I don't mindlessly drink, if that makes sense.
Well, out of the two of us, there's only footage of you drinking on this channel, so...
Mate.
I mean,
blackmail.
You're bringing it up. I'm just trying to point it out. There was a slow motion reel of you drinking the rhubarb wine, a big smile. Yeah.
Only because I'm the better looking one. But anyway, it's interesting. Like, culturally in Australia, I think most people who drink in Australia drink to get drunk, and that's only. Well, I reckon it's more for young people than older generations.
I think that's true. Yeah, people do want to get drunk as soon as possible.
In the cheapest way possible. Yeah, so, I guess that's why. But, But overall, my week's been good. Nothing too exciting. I'm just, like, waiting for the borders to open. We'll see, right? Like, we will see with that. But speaking of China, so you're talking about this NBA basketballer. Recent news.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, you will all have heard Enes Kanter from the Boston Celtics has released now 2 videos at the time of recording. Who knows, there might be another one by the time this drops.
So the first video was about...
Freeing Tibet.
Then the second was about Uyghurs.
Yeah. Now, he might actually be just going hit for hit. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we see another video on Hong Kong, another video on Taiwan. But... the NBA is famously, remarkably in China's pocket. Like, it is the poster child for kowtowing before the CCP when it comes to American corporate giants. Okay, so just like in Hollywood, how you can't have movies that offend the Chinese Communist Party because they won't get a Chinese audience, the NBA has bent over backwards to pander to every domestic extreme kind of issue in America without saying a single line of dialogue about anything that might be contrary to Chinese Communist Party doctrine. And so having Enes Kanter come out and make, first of all, one on Tibet, now one on the Uyghurs, probably by the time this comes out, some others as well, it just has detonated the NBA. It has blown it up in China. Enes Kanter is completely blocked in all Chinese media. All Celtics, Boston Celtics games are blocked, so you can't watch any of their matches. And it's unclear what the NBA stance is. I mean, everyone's been hounding them for comment, no doubt, but
of course,
they're in damage control. There's just billions and billions and billions of dollars they've already lost as a consequence of these comments.
Yeah, didn't make it that easy as well, because he literally went out of his way about Xi Jinping is a brutal dictator. Like, was not shy about it.
Not at all. Totally uncompromising. Now, the coach has come out, as I said in my video, that the coach has come out and supported him and said, look, we had a brief conversation. We'll always support the rights of our players to free expression and free speech. There is like a friend I have who's a Hollywood producer who has written a book, which I'll leave the link in the description to this video as I have in my other video, which is a book about how American companies got captured by China and what to do about it. Now, he, as I said, as a Hollywood producer, he has some epic titles against his name, including like some of the Iron Man movies, some other Marvel movies. And he's just like, yeah, we're kowtowing before China, this brutal dictatorship. And it's seriously impacting our artistic license. When we create films, it's with the Chinese market in mind, which is the largest market in the world. The other thing that is astounding is what is actually really successful in China. So if you look at the top grossing Chinese films, they're
Fast and Furious.
Well, Fast and Furious, yeah. So mindless kind of racing car things. There's Wolf Warrior 2, which was the grossing one, and then now, which is another movie. We've got a lot of movies we have to watch, by the way. Now the next movie that has hit the top of the charts in China, it has pushed Wolf Warrior 2 aside, is a film about a bunch of Chinese in the Korean War defeating the Americans.
Oh wow!
So that is now the number one grossing film in China of all time. So it's not like the Chinese market are like warm and fuzzy towards the Americans these days. They're quite happy to see their nationalism take over, and they probably look at these other companies with contempt. They look at the NBA and be like, okay, yeah, you're just going to do whatever we tell you to do because we're completely bought. So having this guy come out and just stand up and say, look, no, I'm not going to. And his personal career and brand, I think, will go through the roof because he's now a household name in a way that he wasn't 3 days ago. And even if he got booted out of the NBA, which I don't think they can do, but if they did, he will have other gigs to keep himself going, no doubt, because he's now highly respected, particularly in American conservative circles. But it puts the NBA in a huge bind, and this is a bind that all American companies are increasingly in, right? Like, if you have someone like Enes Kanter come out and just declare to the world that China is an evil dictatorship, CCP is an evil dictatorship, what does the NBA do? Does it jettison him and upset all the Americans who will just be frothing at the mouth in rage? Or do they back him and lose
billions of dollars?
Tens of billions. Yeah. I've been very contemptuous of celebrities and sports stars and things talking politics, generally speaking, because they don't often have a lot of intelligent things to say.
Well, they don't follow up the action, right? They'll say one thing, but they're really...
Yeah, exactly. And exactly. But Enes Kanter, not only has he said things that are all true, he's actually, like, the message is to the NBA ultimately, right? Like, he's an NBA superstar. And so him saying these things, knowing that the NBA is in the pocket of the Chinese Communist Party, is a message to the NBA, right? It's not and I would have much more sympathy with celebrities and sports stars if their message was to their own sporting codes. I think that's a political lane where they can A, have influence, and B, it's more justified.
Sure.
Much better than having like Hollywood stars sing John Lennon's Imagine and stuff like that.
Oh my God. Yeah. That reminded me. And I also like how Enes basically brought up Pakistan and called out all these leaders. Like, if you're a Muslim, you would speak out about it. What are you doing?
Yes. Yeah, that was impressive.
Yeah, right. I'm like, God, this guy has balls. But the thing is, okay, so totally support the idea, but what actually encouraged him to come out and talk about this? Like, talk about China in this way?
So this is a good question. Enes Kanter, I didn't know this about him. I went and did my research after watching this video. He has long been a staunch critic of the Turkish dictator Erdogan. So he's from Turkey himself. That's what he says is a Muslim brother. He's from Turkey. And Erdogan, over the course of many years, has converted from a would-be moderate sort of democratic figure to an absolute autocrat. And he has imprisoned tens of thousands of opposition leaders. There was this famous time where there was like a coup against him, which he probably engineered himself, and then reacted by arresting over 10,000 intellectuals, political figures, legal figures, judiciary, and so on. So he's an absolute autocrat in the worst Islamist kind of sense. And Enes Kanter has been deeply publicly critical of him. And so far in the last 4 years, the Turkish government have issued 10 arrest warrants for him, right? So he can never go back to Turkey. His father, who was in Turkey, has been arrested multiple times. And his father has like publicly repudiated him and they've disowned their son and everything, but hasn't. Like, he's been still dismissed of every position he's ever held, and he used to be like a university professor or something like that. So Enes Kanter's family has paid a price for his outspoken behavior. Now, of course, as a NBA All-Star or NBA superstar, he will have the money to no doubt compensate his parents and make sure that they're okay. But they're still at the mercy of the Turkish leadership. So Enes Kanter has long been a political actor. And yeah, I mean, he is made personal enemies of the Turkish dictator, which is a big enough deal, particularly if you're a Turk. But also now a public enemy of the CCP, the largest, most populous nation in the world, and then most of the leaders of most of the Muslim world, which he called out, as you say, by name. So he's an interesting guy.
It is interesting, and like, if it would come from anybody else, I don't think it would make as many ripples, because he is part of the NBA and is well known. Yeah, it's wow, like, just wow. And I saw you change your phone, so.
Oh yeah, so new background. It actually works really well. I don't know if you can see that. It's probably out of focus.
Probably out of focus,
yeah.
But.
So speaking of China, you did some research into the so-called lying flat movement, which I found really interesting. We'll talk about that. And I obviously went and did some research based on that and what's happening in the Baltics as a sort of comparison and contrast. But if you want to introduce to everyone watching what the lying flat movement is.
Yeah, so I stumbled upon this randomly as I kind of getting more interested in China, what's happening in the space with Taiwan. I was interested to know what's happening with young people. And there's this movement called lying flat, Tanping or something, where young people are now, instead of, going out and finding work, are now staying at home and doing nothing, essentially. Yeah, so it was made famous by this person named Luo Huazong. He made a blog post that went viral on Baidu, which is their Chinese blog website, talking about all the societal pressures he's feeling as a young person, saying he can't afford a house, what is the point? He'd rather just stay in a cave or a box and lie flat for the rest of his life. Which made me think, like, why are young people in China feeling this way? Is it because there's a lack of nationalism, and, is it just because they're being worked to the bone? And as I did more research, there's a big working culture in China to do 996. So you basically work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. And that is just not sustainable for anybody. And then what is it for? If you're going to do it for, the growth for China, do.
Well, this guy's blog post was fairly recent, right?
April, am I right? April? God, April.
Yeah, and since then, so it went completely viral in China, and now it's since been heavily censored by the Chinese Communist Party. You know, anything to do with the lying flat movement, as I understand it, is significantly criticized, but it really resonated with millions and millions of young people in China.
Yeah, no, it did. It did. And I can totally see why. If you think about the housing bubble they're experiencing now, you know, people investing all their money into an apartment that hasn't been built yet. And as a young person, you're not only trying to feed your immediate family, but you're feeding everybody else, generations. It's very common for you to look after your parents, your grandparents, and your grandparents, your great-grandparents. So to have all those pressures around you, it's like, what's the point? Like, wages aren't really going up, and you have the works of the bone. Like, they say you can only hold if you die, you can only hold a place for 20 years. So, yeah. And gosh, I think this pressure for is not just experienced in China, but just around the world. You know, the gap between the rich and poor is just getting wider as our economy is moving to, you know, the digital economy, to technology, and we no longer need, you know, the people on the ground to run these things. We have AI to do that work for us.
Yeah, if we think about the pressures that a Chinese young person faces today, so house prices have exponentially gone crazy, despite the recent Evergrande collapse and stuff like that, which is another issue. But certainly housing costs have gone through the roof, pardon the pun. And then there are family pressures, as you say. You know, these are all children of the one-child policy, so it's not like they're sharing their burdens with 4 or 5 other siblings. They're expected to look after their parents, and the Chinese government has gone out of their way to ask everyone to have children because of the aging population.
They can't afford it. And there was the vote, right? So that they introduced the one-child policy for years and years, decades, and then they're like 2-child policy, and now they're like 3-child, and people are like, well, I don't get it. I can't afford it. Oh, yeah, it's insane. And yeah, their population is aging. So what are they going to do about it? So.
Yeah, so the government is paralyzed by the fact that they're going to get old before they get rich. The median age in China now is about 38, and the workforce is already shrinking. So they would need to have massive baby boom all across the country to arrest this decline. And you said that there was like an online survey about like, are you ready for the baby birthing time or whatever it's called?
Pretty much. I think a Chinese national news on their equivalent Twitter was like, are you ready for the 3-child policy? And it's like, yes, no, I don't care. And I don't care was like 90%. And they had to shut it down within the day.
Yes. And that's just, I think, explains a lot about some of the Communist Party's policies in China at the moment, because and I think they're taking this seriously. In fact, the other day, and maybe I'm more awake to it, but the other day, Xi Jinping mentioned lying flat for the first time. Okay, so it has reached that level, the very top. And it is because if you think about the social controls they've introduced, you know, people aren't allowed to play video games for more than 3 hours a week. They're restricting, you know, online celebrity, various masculine figures, roles in the media, in movies, and they're strongly encouraging everyone to get married. Now, the social pressures will work to an extent, but when you've got the 996 pressures, the looking after parents pressures, the housing unaffordable, and how much does it cost for average salary to buy a house in Shenzhen?
Shenzhen was over 20 years. I can't remember the actual house, but it took 20 years without eating or drinking to buy a house in Shenzhen.
That's insane. I mean, like the relative to income, housing has gotten more expensive across most of the world, but that is beyond the pale. That is out of reach for the vast majority of young people. And so the government recognizes, I'm sure, that if they want people to have kids, they have to make it possible.
Yeah.
So they'll introduce all these restrictions, and they'll probably even introduce more restrictions. Who knows? They might even mandate marriage, and they might well, they might. I mean, the thing, if they're willing to, if it's a government is willing to stop people from having more than one child, and introduce, you know, concentration camps and forced sterilizations and things in various parts of the country, then there is nothing that'll stop them from saying we want everyone to have 3 or 4 kids.
Is it unequal distribution between men and women?
Oh yeah,
Do you reckon?
As a consequence of that, yeah, there's more men than women.
Yeah.
Now the Baltic countries, by contrast, like they have their own problems. So their aging population, they're about 33, 34 is their median age.
Yeah.
So they're not quite as old as China, but they're getting there. They've got a significant migration out of the Baltic countries. The latest census in Latvia, for example, had the greatest population decline of the 3 Baltic countries. Lithuania kind of flatlined because some people came back and they had some immigration.
Yeah.
And Estonia also went into decline. So most people are moving to other parts of Europe in pursuit of higher wages and higher living conditions. But there is a way out for the Baltic countries, and that is to attract those people back. Once those young people are back, then you'll have an increase in workforce. You'll have a birthing age. You'll increase birthing rates, and also because their population is extremely small, immigration will solve a lot of the problems if they want to have immigration. So, if you import people from Ukraine, if you import people from Belarus, then you will be able to maintain economic growth and growth in population. Housing prices have flatlined relative to income. So housing affordability is not great in these countries, but it is much more accessible than many parts of the world. And the reason being that it's a supply and demand issue, right? The population's been going down, which means in housing demand has also been going down, and wages have been increasing. So it's kept house prices affordable. But in China, you've got like new cities just popping up like daisies out of nowhere, with people coming out from the deep rural areas to find work. So there's this huge influx of people into these areas that didn't have anyone before. So that just drives real estate prices. And they don't have the same option in China. You can't just bring in huge amounts of immigration because China has 1.5 billion people. Where are these people going to come from? How are you going to get so many people into China that you change the demographics of the country as a whole? It's not really possible. The only solution they have is if Chinese women have lots of Chinese babies. That's the only way forward for them.
But they need support. They need to be able to take maternity leave or something, right? They can't just be like, yes, we're going to mandate you having a baby. But it's like, well, I can have a child. It doesn't mean it's going to be brought up properly. Which
brings us back to the lying flat movement. So what are they doing instead with the lying? What is lying in flat like in terms of, with all of these pressures?
Oh, yes, all these pressures. So young people are rejecting the 996 culture. They're like, look, I'm going to work 2 days a week and then I'm just going to play video games and enjoy life for the rest of it, because what's the point? I can't move up. I have very what's that word? Social mobility. I can't get wealthy. And I look after all these things and it's just too much pressure. So they're trying to work less and just play for the rest of the time. Other people are just, doing nothing and leaning on their parents for money. It's really hard, right? Like, how are you meant to encourage these young people to, go work? So there was an analogy about how you can't easily chop the chives when they're lying flat. I guess at the expense of their health and well-being, for the sake of growing China's economy.
Well, there does seem to be definitely a two-class, two-tier society in China these days. Those people that own capital, as I said, with the widening gap between rich and poor, then it's extremely difficult for someone who hasn't got a significant amount of financial capital behind them to make enough money to invest in high production, high value assets and move from being, low backward sort of, rural class to upmarket, Beijing finance center. That transition is too great for many people. But the expectations on workers to strive for that seems to be huge.
It is weird. I think the Chinese dream is different, right? You know how we talk about the Australian dream and the American dream of you too can be wealthy and have a house and a big backyard and a dog or whatever and look after and have a great family. Whereas the Chinese dream is you will fight for our country and we're going to be great again, you know? And if you don't do that, even if you are wealthy, you're going to be stood down the CCP, like they see with Jack Ma and Alibaba. Like, no matter how powerful and wealthy you are, you will still be under CCP.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, one of the things, like I mentioned the change in rules around video games and stuff like that. But one of the reasons they've clamped down on Jack Ma is the same issue. They've portrayed him as a blood-sucking capitalist, and that only the Chinese Communist Party can make it so you have a work-life balance. You know, if you have Jack Ma's, you know, they'll just make you work to death. But us benevolent CCP, we'll find a way to make common prosperity for all. So they're mindful of this demand. I think their primary goal is how to get people to have kids. And then they go, okay, well, we can't allow people to fall despondent or lose hope in our country. That's their requirement. They want China to be the world's greatest power again. And so they do actually need to respond to this this movement, even as they censor it and punish people who ascribe to it.
I want to look back to your point about the Baltic, right? How they're facing, I guess, migration of young people going to seek. How
are you sitting so highly? Oh, you've got like 4. Okay, everybody at home, I didn't shrink and Charlene didn't suddenly get tall. She's like got 4 or 5 pillows like underneath her right there. So she's fully cheating.
Secret. I want to look tall on camera, okay?
I was like, no, because the battery ran out, and so I was like, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll do the reframing, and so we've started up again, and she's like, oh no, like maybe the camera's a bit square, like I'm about too low, and I'm like, no, if I do it there, then I'll be like out of the frame. But no, she was right because she was sitting highly. It's like special effects, guys.
Get the pillow. Yeah, I'm losing it. But he looks better. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
Damn. Just like out of familiar experience. Going back to my question about the Baltic, how do you think, what can the Baltic do to attract more young people back to their country?
Oh, well, that's the $1 million question. I mean, first of all, part of this channel hopefully can help in a small, modest way, because the Baltic countries themselves are underappreciated. They are truly remarkable. They're peaceful. They have everything that Europe people admire in Europe. You know, old history, architecture, beautiful forests and landscapes, and a really dynamic business sector, particularly in the entrepreneurial and digital space. And yet, it is not globally recognized appropriately. Like one day the Baltic will be discovered, and it'll hopefully not become the next Paris or anything like that, but people will have a much greater sense of pride in being Baltic and living in the Baltic than I think they do, because not because there's anything to be ashamed of. It's they just haven't got the same national story taught to them in the way that other countries teach their national story. I think a lot of it is because they view themselves in opposition to the Soviet Union and communism. But even that has a greater degree of currency than it once did. Like Lithuania, of course, famously standing up to the CCP based on its history. So it is driving a degree of a brand of moral authority. So this kind of elevated status of the Baltic countries should attract people back, because they'll see what a special thing it is to be from that part of the world, and how unique such an identity is. No,
I can definitely see what you mean. Like, it couldn't be the next Silicon Valley and actually attract like true innovation and being able to have freedom of speech and ideas.
Well, yes. I mean, the Silicon Valley is not the free-thinking world that we would hope it would be. There is a monoculture. There's a very small number of very loud people that dominate the discussion when it comes to social issues. Whereas, if you're in Estonia, I think there's a much greater diversity of opinion and thought, as expressed, and I'm sure we'll get to it, when it came to our drugs video on the decriminalization of Lithuania. But to answer your question, I think improving national pride, patriotism, and the national narrative and story of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, showing how important the language is and the ethnicity and the heritage and history. I think all of that will help. Then the basic stuff like incomes and finance and infrastructure. That's why I'm really passionate about the Rail Baltica project, the high-speed rail to connect Tallinn to Vilnius, Kaunas, and Warsaw. That will hugely advantage those countries. And I think people have they've been looking at it in a kind of a narrow perspective. And if you're kind of a venture capitalist or you're an investor, that's how you kind of look at it. You're like, okay, what's the freight improvement efficiencies? What are the receipts on ticketing and all of that? How much return on investment? But I think it's going to be a snowballing effect. If you can live in a country where you can travel right across the region in a few hours, you're going to feel like you're in a super first world country. One of the things that you see in all the travel vlogs when it comes to Lithuania, Latvia, is the quality of the transportation. When people get on a bus for 10 euros going from one corner of Lithuania to the other, they've got in entertainment on these buses that are better than most airlines. You can compare that to, going through, Macedonia or Montenegro or something like that. The quality is just night and day. So when people begin to appreciate the internet access, the technology, the infrastructure, and their history and story and incomes rising, well, then sheer supply and demand will bring people back. Yeah. And also, I think people... They've had kind of starry-eyed, rose-tinted glasses when it comes to the West, like France and Britain and America. And when you travel to these places and you see the problems that they have, yes, they are absolutely remarkable countries. And, if I was born in the US or Britain, or indeed as I am in Australia, wouldn't want to be anywhere else, okay? But you will see the problems that don't exist in the Baltic countries. And if you're a young person that's been socialized to all of these values and norms and beliefs, you'll be more attracted to come home if you've got the infrastructure and financial support. So I think we're on the right track. We are yet to see the big change that we need to see. Lithuania's population has recovered, slightly, but a lot of that is through immigration because of, the crisis at the border with Belarus and the crisis in Ukraine. Whereas, increasing birth rates, bringing young people back to the country, that hasn't happened yet properly, but that's what this channel and things are about. It's still like, look, if you're a young person, you're watching this and you live elsewhere, at least keep in the back of your mind just how special your homeland is and how much it needs you, right?
No, I like that. And contrary to that, I just want to say to those Chinese people that are lying flat, keep going. Because if you can't beat the system, then...
Well, you do need to... you're only a human. You can't, you're not a machine.
Yeah, you're not a machine. Like, do what makes you happy in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I was as sanguine about that. I think that the lying flat movement, and maybe I'm wrong, because I've only kind of been reserving it recently, but it does strike me as a somewhat nihilistic philosophy. So it quotes Diogenes and Greek philosophers that were the cynics and the people that just sort of thought, there's not much meaning to life. And now you can argue that case, but what it strikes me as is a great despondency, like giving up, a feeling that you're never going to be able to succeed. And that is absolutely logical and true in the context of the Chinese system. Like it's a
and
rational
the COVID
response.
Era as well.
Yes. But what I want to see in China is a change in the system, right? Like that young people can feel like they can get on the housing ladder and that they can feel like they can get married and have children and support everyone and have a good, happy, prosperous life. They don't have to give up and just do the absolute bare minimum to survive. That strikes me as the less bad of two very bad options. So the lying flat movement to me seems like the alternative is just worse. So we're not going to do that. We're going to rebel against that. And I think that is perfectly good. You have our support. But I think that what has motivated that isn't some kind of new philosophy of living minimally and wanting to, eschew worldly possessions and become a Buddhist monk or something. No, it's more like when we're being sold a lie, we're not able to make it in this system where we have to work, all day, every day and have families and support our parents and get on the housing ladder and do all these other things. they're just saying, no, we're not going to do that. And so it does strike me as an act of desperation more than a new way of being, if you know what I mean. That's just my view. Maybe I'm wrong. I would love to hear your thoughts if you have heard of the lying flat movement, or you're got Chinese friends, or you're Chinese yourself. Certainly, let us know.
I think in reality, not many people are lying flat. I don't think it's actually possible, especially to live in the inner city. It's too expensive. Unless you have a big family that can support you. But I guess when I say keep going, it's like, well, hopefully the CCP will wake up. And like you said, Xi Jinping has already talked about it, that they will be changed, that there will be, I guess, social supports for people, and that, the standard of living will rise for those in the middle and lower class. And that's the best we can do. I don't know. It was just like, it's more like watch this space. Okay. And then one other topic you talked this week, the war on drugs.
Yeah, one of your babies.
Yes, it is. It's public health. Anyway, so Lithuania's announced.
Well, before you go on, for those that don't know, introduce your background and your expertise. So.
Yeah. Do people know that? I don't even know if people know that.
Well, I mean, some people would, but you'd have to watch every single episode.
True. So
so far you know that she gives me a lot of hell about drinking. That's what you know.
So my background is public health. I did an honours in public health, so that's like, I don't know how to describe that to international audience, but a year of research in
fun police.
I'm not the fun police. Am I? I don't know. Do I come across as fun police?
No, I didn't say you personally. You said public health. I don't know how to explain it, and that's how to explain it.
But yeah, I really like studying public health, just because you get to understand the determinants of health and all different aspects. So you don't just look at physical health, you can look at, societal things as well. And one of them is drugs and, different policies and how that affects people. So I really liked your story about Lithuania decriminalizing drugs.
Thanks, Kantaris, for the story. Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Kantaris. Because it's logical. Like, why are we, I guess, putting people in jail? It's costing taxpayers a lot of money to keep them in jail, firstly, for very small quantities for their personal use. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, I guess I understand if it's like a huge, I guess, scheme of for corruption and all that kind of things, it could breed that. And then I think in the comments, that was a big argument, that it kind of would enable other things to transpire.
Yeah.
But the evidence is just not there in research. In fact, you're actually going to save people's health and well-being by, not making it legal per se, but decriminalizing it so that they're not thrown in jail for having, this amount or whatever.
And as we delve into this topic, we had some remarkable discussion on the channel. Like I think of all the videos we've done, this had the most lively and constructive debate. With people with different points of view talking in good faith. So I found that to be, not only people have very strong views on this, and that's great, but people were talking to each other in a fruitful way, generally speaking. So I appreciate that. I thought this was what this channel is all about.
Yeah.
I of course agree that decriminalization doesn't mean endorsement, doesn't mean legalization. It just means that if someone is not distributing, manufacturing, trafficking illicit drugs, they've only got a small quantity for their own use, it's a waste of time and money to allocate resources that should be allocated to other things for the purposes of prosecuting that. Now, there is different ways to think about and cut this issue. I've talked about it just then in the context of resources and resource allocation. That is, you've only got a certain amount of investigative and police resources, so you want to spend that time more efficiently, okay? But if you're in an environment of, let's say, investigative abundance, that you have so many police that you don't have enough crime to go around, you just that you have a surplus of law enforcement, then it might be beneficial to criminalize small quantities of drugs, because you do have the resources spare to prosecute those offenses, right? You actually go through the whole process and you can afford to lock people up and all that sort of stuff. Now, that is one argument. I look at it purely from a cost benefit analysis, really.
Yeah.
But then there are people that would say, No, just on its own ethical standards, on its own morality, on its own freedom of liberty and so on, you shouldn't criminalize these drugs. In fact, a lot of people say you should legalize them and regulate them and tax them on the basis that it's not really the government's role to stop people doing what they want to do in their own bodies in their own space.
I've heard for them, the libertarians be like, you should legalize all drugs and then you can standardize it and make sure people are taking drugs in a safe way, and then they can go to their doctor and being like, I'm taking this and this and this. Is that okay? Like, which is kind of, I don't know, makes me a bit shaken.
Yeah, I mean, there's a video that I really like that's still up from before we went to Baltic World, which is How We Believe What We Believe on ideologies. And I do encourage people to watch it if you've got time. I do like that video. But, you know, if you were to ask me, do I think that we should regulate gambling, or do I think that we should regulate alcohol consumption? I would say, philosophically, I would say, no, people have a right to do whatever it is they want to do, and they should be able to do with their bodies what they want to do. If they like to gamble and it's fair and then no one's cheating, etc., they should be able to do that. However, that's my ideology. But when I look at the data and look at the harm, I think that there is a better balance for a lot of these things. If we were to craft a regulatory regime for gambling from scratch, we would have gambling, but it would be more restrictive than it is in Australia. Australia, for those people that don't know, we are by far and away the biggest gamblers in the world. Like we are to gambling what Americans are to guns. Like there's just no comparison with anybody else.
Yeah. Just before this, I was like, "Hey, got lotto. I didn't win lotto this week, but that's okay."
Yeah. Even Charlene is you know we'll gamble on the so-called soft gambling, right? Whereas the Lithuania has more alcohol consumption than most places.
Although it's decreased over the years. So thank you to viewers that pointing that out. So Lithuania has cracked down actually on alcohol advertising, taxation, things that, you know, are logical, and it actually declined quite. They're in the top 5, but they're not first. So that's the point here.
Yeah, and so then the question becomes, what is the appropriate level of alcohol consumption? We, of course, had prohibition in the United States in the 1920s, where the result was more alcoholism, not less, and the whole gangsterism phenomena in the United States that lasted for many decades. Okay, so prohibition of alcohol clearly doesn't work, particularly in an environment where not everyone else is doing it. Like if most countries in the world, heroin is illegal, okay? Whereas if you're the only country that's prohibited a certain substance and it's very commonly used everywhere else, very hard to stop the trafficking, right? Yeah, like everyone's just going to bring it in. Yeah. So, although Australia, you know, when it comes to tobacco, but cigarettes are legal in Australia, but they're prohibitively expensive for most like people.
They really made it impossible for. Well, it's more like it's not illegal, right? It's not legal to smoke, but you know, there's the age, there's like the ban on advertising, there's very high taxation, like you're spending like $50 on a packet. More, it's going up every year. And then they've got services to prevent people take up tobacco or like to weed off tobacco, and it's in schools as well, lots of education in schools, the whole lot.
Yeah, and you would expect, because cigarettes are lawful everywhere, that we would have this thriving black market of tobacco products, but we don't really. Like, not on the. I mean, I'm not trying to buy smoking cigarettes on the black market, but you would expect, given the prices, you would have a lot of bootleg tobacco coming through, but we don't. And I think that's probably just because we're a massive island nation with a lot of restrictions and a lot of surveillance when it comes to these types of things. Whereas if you were Lithuania or Latvia or Estonia and you tried to ban tobacco, you'd have Russian cigarettes on every street corner. So the question with the alcohol then is, all right, you reduce alcohol. What is the level of alcohol consumption that is ideal? You can't prohibit it in a way that's going to be effective. Is it the minimum amount of consumption that doesn't result in like other types of crime, like happening, or is there a level above that which is ideal? Like these are questions that we don't have good answers for.
Yeah, I think I mean, with alcohol control, like they kind of have to do it relative to other things, right? So yes, they know that drinking alcohol just by itself, doing nothing else, you know, you just don't harm to your body, okay, but the level of harm is disproportionate to, you know, the fun, I guess. But then if you're driving and drinking, there's harm there, and an injury to others there's a risk there. So you need to regulate that, right, during driving. And then swimming and all those other things as well.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Most injuries in Australia, like, you know, particularly the young men, involve alcohol. Let's be honest. The other thing I found interesting about this whole issue is Lithuania has among the lowest drug consumptions in Europe. Right? It's just it's almost a non-issue, whereas Estonia and Latvia are among the highest. Now, my hypothesis, and this is purely conjecture. This is not Crispin, the expert, having done the research. This is Crispin putting an idea out there. I think the reason is the large Russian ethnic minorities, because we had that whole era of Afghanistan where under the Taliban, all the poppy plantations and stuff were completely destroyed, because the Taliban, repressive and horrible though they absolutely are, one thing that was in our favor was that they don't like drugs, right? So they destroyed it. And then when the United States overthrew the Taliban, it went from 2,000 hectares of poppy across the country to something like 800,000 hectares in the course of a few years, with the biggest buyer being Russia. So a huge heroin problem was kicked off in Russia as a consequence of Afghan poppy fields. Fast forward a bit, you've got obviously other markets in Europe, a lot of those drugs flooding Europe. But also consumers being kind of Russian expats, you know, Russian mafia distributing these drugs. Russian mafia is active in the Baltic. In fact, I should actually do a video on the Russian mafia in the Baltic. I think it'll be really interesting. In fact, yeah, I'll definitely do that. But that's my hypothesis, that there is a higher proportion of drug use among, and this is not me coming down on the Russian minorities in Latvia or Estonia or anything like that. Like, I think what's happened is that the Russians, in this case, have been victims. The Afghan, except for the mafia, who are absolute bastards, the Afghan drug production has just skyrocketed.
Yeah, I mean, increases availability, right? And if Russia's the biggest buyer, there's just more available.
That's right,
and so, this enables it into their culture and becomes normalized.
Yeah, so I've been to Russia, you know, a few times, and I've been to cafes where like mothers are like, and this is heartbreaking. Like mothers will be like, you know, over their sons that are like 20 years of age, who just aren't there, right? Like they're just like the babushkas, the grandmothers and stuff are like, you know, shaking them and so on, and they're in another world. They've completely lost a whole generation as a consequence of that. So it'll be interesting. One of the things will be interesting to see what happens now that the Taliban are back in power in Afghanistan, no doubt destroying all of these drug fields, which they absolutely despise. What happens to the drug problem in Russia? Does it diminish, or do they get other sources of production? Be very interesting. So I'll do another video on the drug issues there. So that's my hypothesis. It might be completely wrong. It might be distributed differently in Estonia and Latvia. It might be less of a problem among the expats there and so on. But that's my hypothesis, because there's only 6% ethnic Russians in Lithuania, as opposed to like 30% in Latvia. So that would be my guess. But maybe I'm wrong. And I don't want people to say, to take away from this, that I'm saying the Russians are all drug addicts and so on. No, I'm not saying that. But it's just a scientific guess.
Yeah. But I totally feel for those who have more a conservative view of like, if we decriminalize it, are we encouraging it? Like, you know, like it is a concern, especially among children. Like, and if it's why it becomes more available, then again, young people would take it up and perhaps become long-term users. I've never taken drugs, so I really don't know. Like, I know there's different types, and I guess the level of harm is different for different substances, so the policies might be different. Yeah, it's just, I guess, from my point of view, when we decriminalize drugs, you're really looking at the flow-on effects. If you do criminalize somebody for a small quantity of drugs, for their own personal use. Like, what's the flow-on effects? You know, they go to jail, then they lose their livelihood. You know, it affects their family, and then it kind of there's concentric circles that go around that for that. So but
well, no, I think you make a really valid point. You know, is it efficient to do that? Is it going to reduce that? There is just a harm minimization principle. What is going, like the harm from the drug itself, the harm that results from people trying to support their habits, so they're taking up crime, and then the harm from like society, from families, from all of that. If you take that person and put them into prison, that they can't support their children, they can't be there for their sick relatives and so forth. You do create a spiraling problem. So that is very valid, but there obviously has to be a line drawn, right? Yeah. You can't have you can't use that as an excuse for everything. You can't say, well, this person is a violent criminal that's robbed all these like people and broken into things and caused like all these injuries, and they can continue to walk the streets because they got children, right? Like you can't look at it that way.
Yeah, where I see harmonization so grey and it's still contentious in public health is e-cigarettes. And in terms of I'll
explain what that is. They might have different terminology.
Yeah, well, perhaps. Yeah, so electronic cigarettes. So it's instead of
or vapes or things like that.
Vaping. Yeah, vaping. Or vaping. Yeah, that's it. Right. So instead of having smoke, it's vaporized tobacco. In Australia, it's banned, but there are ways of getting around it. And like we're just looking at the research, the more young people are taking vaping instead of cigarettes because there's flavors added to them, perhaps. And tobacco companies are encouraging it's a harm minimization strategy for those who are on tobacco. And again, where do you draw the line with that? They're not wrong, but it's a bit when Australia's population or prevalence of smoking cigarettes is 2%, lowest in the world. Yeah. So having this, is it really helpful or is it an enabler?
Well, it's demonically brilliant, right? Because what you do is you get them all hooked on tobacco as 15-year-olds, and then you say, oh, there are all these 15-year-olds on tobacco. Let's come and help out. Switch to vape. I agree that is vexing. I think you have to look at it as a country dependent. And I have come around to the idea that it is a bad idea to have it lawful as vape. Because this comes back to my philosophical challenge. I'm like, okay, is the evidence that vaping is harmful sufficiently great? And I don't think the evidence is there. You point to the one in 500,000 teenagers that develop a lung condition that's permanent or whatever from it. We're talking low numbers, so much so that you'll if you get one person, they'll be on the news, right? And the more you see something in the news, the less serious you take it, because only exceptional things are on the news. Everyday things don't get on the news. So I'm not persuaded the level of harm is there from a medical point of view. Having said that, from a social point of view of getting people addicted to nicotine, the overall consequences thereof, the potential for health issues, and also just the social opprobrium that comes from having people with vape flowing around everywhere. It can kind of smell and be unpleasant. That it for a country that doesn't currently have a major nicotine addiction, that went a great length to remove that, it is unjustified introducing it. It's not like we're not missing it enough to justify its introduction lawfully. If you're in a country like China or Russia or many parts of Europe where smoking is huge, like Hungary, right? Then it's a no-brainer to have vaping, because it's not like the choices between cigarettes and no cigarettes. The choices between cigarettes and cigarettes. And if you have vapes, then you can encourage people to transition to vapes. And once you've transitioned everyone to vapes and you have dramatically lowered the health consequences of cigarette smoking, so lung cancers, brain cancers, throat cancers, etc., then you can get rid of cigarettes entirely. Say, look, if you want to do anything on nicotine in this country, you have to vape. And then you slowly build up the restrictions on vaping to make it less and less prevalent in the society. So you transition to one and then to nothing.
It just boggles my mind. I guess we're so fortunate in Australia. Why can't we just go from 1 to 0? But I totally understand if it's like a whole cultural thing and there's different policies and it's part of,
Yeah, Australia's story
lots of
there is a
work.
remarkable one. It is by far and away the greatest public health success that Australia has had, is to go from smoking being on every news billboard, every sporting thing, introduction on every television ad, to totally non-existent. And there were many things about that. Taxation, of course, being one, but also like brand substitution. So if people were sponsored by tobacco companies because they had the money, well, they had alternatives. And because we put sporting people on a pedestal here in Australia, you would have seen my reasons why we did so well at the Olympics video. That was where to start. Get tobacco advertising out of sport and health, and get new money in there to make up for the money that was lost to give those actual sporting codes and things options. So we did extraordinarily well.
Yeah. And plain packaging, first one in the world.
Yeah. I was in the Commonwealth Department of Health when we did that, and I know Nicola Roxon, who was the Health Minister of Australia at the time. Very.
A little riffraff in that.
well. So I one of my little moments of pride is and this is something you might not even know, was I helped draft her answer to a question that I knew was coming, which was, why is it that tobacco? Because plain packaging in Australia, for those who don't know, you can't have any branding on a cigarette in Australia. It's all this terrible beige color. Whenever you buy cigarettes, it's locked behind a cabinet and the entire packet is covered in something horrible. Now, I don't support that last thing. I think that's a bit over the top. But basically, there is no branding. Yeah,
it's just a name in like white font, plain. That's it.
Yeah, and tobacco companies were very creative in bringing legal cases and stuff against that, which is a story for another day. But the question I knew that was coming was that, why is it, if cigarettes are legal in Australia, is it okay to completely take over their brand, right? Because that is owned by someone. It's owned by the tobacco companies. So to use public policy and is anti-competitive. It violates all kinds of WTO rules under normal circumstances, not in this circumstance, but under normal circumstances. We had to make a special provision in the US-Australia Free Trade Agreement to exclude tobacco companies specifically against the ISDS provisions that protects these trademarks, because we knew this was coming. And so Nicola Roxon, the health minister, was asked, why is this acceptable? And her answer, which everyone accepted, right, except the tobacco companies, but it was very powerful. And she also, credit to her, she delivered it powerfully. She said, look, I don't accept this. Cigarettes are the only lawful product sold anywhere in the Western world. When used as directed, will kill you, right? And that shut that whole thing up. It's like, it's true. There aren't many products that if you consume it in the right way and in the right quantities as directed by the various advice, it will still cause you tremendous damage. And that is not true for alcohol. It's not true for caffeine. It's not true for fast food. And all of those have massive health consequences. Tobacco is in a league of its own in that respect. So that meant... now, one of the problems with the vapes is that because the evidence isn't there,
they can,
could we have the same brand restrictions? And I suspect under WTO laws, we would probably lose that case. So better to just not have it lawful at all. If it's never introduced as a lawful product, then they don't get those lawful protections.
Interesting. Yeah. Look at all it is public health talk. Yeah. Oh, makes me feel better, like, about how I've influenced you in some ways.
You have. Much to, the vape thing is definitely the biggest way you've influenced me in public health. I have come around to your position. And on that note, hopefully none of you got this far.
What do you mean?
Oh, no, I was going to wrap it up.
But on this note, thank you so much for everyone commenting on that video. I think it's a really contentious topic, but it's really important to talk about it. It's very easy for things like this to get in a spiral and everybody debating and arguing against one another, but they've been really respectful and fair. Every perspective I've read is like, yeah, that's a good point, and that's a good point too. And then, where's that threshold? I guess with the what you were saying before was the level of harm versus proportion to the level of harm. What's the policy?
Yeah, and
to meet
resource
that.
allocation,
And resource
return on investment. That's my pragmatic
way of doing it. But then there's also an ethical way of doing it. And it's interesting. And the context of the Baltic.
We'll definitely watch and see the results of this legislation in a few years' time. I'm sure Charlene will keep tabs on the data.
Yes.
And we'll touch back on this and see how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I forgot, right, on the alcohol thing, they raised the age to 20 years old. I'm so glad I'm over 20, so we can go, but also another factor to...
Oh, did you hear that, guys? So she gives me hell about alcohol, but if you listen to the wording she just used, I'm glad I'm over 20 so we can go. Not so that she can drink. It's like we wouldn't even go if she couldn't drink. Well,
you said the fun place.
I'm seeing something here.
But I also want to enjoy all the food. Maybe we'll cut that out. No. Alright, we're going to end it here before I say something else stupid. Any questions, any comments, please leave them down below. Otherwise, stay safe and...
Ciao for now.